In the book, there's several branches of magic, and there's elemental magic, like Avatar: The Last Airbender. If any of you've watched it, yeah, or like Captain Planet, if that's how far back. And that's considered like street magic. It's based on instinct. You're born with the ability to control an element, and you gravitate towards it, and you learn. It's like you don't need a Hogwarts education. So it's considered low class magic because people who can't afford education or use that type of magic. Whereas we have the Harry Potter magic, which my thief character calls desk magic / nerd magic, where you have to read books, you have to learn pronunciation, you have to learn about intent. It's basically Harry Potter magic, and that's considered high class magic, because you have to afford the tutors, you have to be able to afford like the books and all these things. So I wanted to reflect the idea of like street smart versus book smart. They're both extremely valuable, but we're taught that one is so much more important than the other, or one reflects higher class, higher intelligence, and that's not the case. So the girl, Finn, who's the thief, she's really great at the elemental magic, and she controls stone. Whereas Alfie has spent his life at a desk, which is what she says. She's always just like, you look like you've been spending your life at a desk. And he's like, all right, it is what it is. But he's learned all these intense, complex spoken magic and written magic that she has never seen. And he's never used his elemental magic to fight because it's considered low class. So the two of them learn a lot about the different types of magic and how they're useful from each other. And I kind of wanted to just show like both those forms of intelligence are really useful, and one shouldn't be traded for the other.
Yeah. Okay, I like that, because I thought I was like, oh, maybe it's a commentary on this, but I feel like that's way cooler. Well, even if I didn't, I wouldn't say that out loud. But yeah, I like that you're valuing both. It's weird, especially I feel like as you get older too, you start seeing how, okay, you can do this, but you don't know what this, or it's like, this is your job, but this doesn't look good. So I don't know. You're like, I don't know how to tell you as a human being that this does not look good, and you can't put it on my book.
Or you always know that someone who's really book smart, and they go out in the real world and they don't know how to use like a parking meter or something, and you're like, like, this is real world things. Put the coins in the meter. One of my cousins doesn't know how to use a parking meter, but she's brilliant. So just like I just wanted to kind of like show like the value in both of those systems, because when you only have one, you're unbalanced. You can't use parking meters. Yeah. So you want to like
you can't drive.
You can't drive. So yeah, that's what the magic system is about.
I'm curious because I would say most authors don't have a background in publishing before they become authors. So how did that influence how did that influence you, either as a writer or as someone writing something with the intent to publish? Like, did you feel like did you say, oh, I'm definitely not going to do that, or when I do this, it's going to be like this, or was it just like, or was it even just, I know I can do this because I've seen other people who I think are worse than me, which is real sometimes. Sometimes you have to, like, you don't believe in yourself, but then you're like, but that person's definitely objectively worse, and they believe in themselves enough, so I should at least match that.
It's like all of those things.
Okay.
Like, being in publishing helped and hindered, because I saw the conditions that draft would come in at, and I was like, I can do a cleaner draft, and if I do that, they'll pay more attention to me, because I was the editorial assistant who got the drafts. I'd open the page and be like, this is not clean. There's so many...
Like, what do you mean by clean?
Like grammatical errors, issues when it comes to like describing the world, so I'm confused as soon as I start reading it. Like things like that is how a lot of drafts come in. And you can still get into them. You can still want to acquire them for your house, but it's just harder, because if you get confused, or if the writing isn't flowing well, then you're just less likely to fall in love with it. So I was like, I can at the very least make it clean, so it'd be harder to say no to. But then at the same time, I got messed up, because I'd be in like a marketing meeting, and some like head of marketing be like, you know what, I'm just so tired of stories about thieves. If I see one more story about a thief, and I'll just be like, this is my whole thing. I have to go home. What is she now, a baker? Like, you hear all these things, and like so many people will be, or like you'll hear someone say like, oh, like dystopia is over. Like, we said that Hunger Games 5 is coming out or some stuff.
Well, it's funny because
I don't know.
You heard it here first, folks.
We thought vampires were done. We got that back around.
Well, the funny thing is everything's always done until someone does it in a fresh and exciting way. Yeah. Which is, it's like daunting, but it's not, because you as the creator can always do something in a way no one's ever seen before, because you've literally never done it.
Yeah, there's always a chance.
Yeah, and especially then with dystopia and adventure, and this is very specific, but it's always like dystopia's out, fantasy's in. And it's like, they're the same story.
So,
but yeah, it's hard.
It's like I heard like so many things, and if I'd listened to all of them, I would have just put my computer away because my laptop away. There's no way to write. You hear something every day. It's like, you know what? I hated Harry Potter. I don't want to read about wizards. Like, okay, like, or like I hate romance. I hate slow burn romance. Like, I don't know. Like, so I had to learn, like, when you're in that building and everybody's job is to critique books, that's all that's happening. Everybody's just talking about what they like, what they think is over, what they think is the next thing, what's the trend. And for a second, I would start to edit based on that. And then I realized if I keep editing based on that, I'm just going to delete every word that I write. So I just had to put up a wall and be like, you know what? People have opinions. I work in publishing, but I need to write exactly what I want to write. We did talk about this.
Opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has them. And a lot of poop comes out.
Exactly.
It's important for your whole life, not just for writing. This is like a very important thing to remember.
Yeah, so it was helpful and also hard.
I feel like it was a training, though, for being out in the world. Even though we're still kind of, because we're still human beings, but it does. I told my story because she's like, oh, well, I read this review. I was like, pause. Why were you reading a review? Because that's the one thing we learned is we can't read reviews. And I told Maya when I learned I couldn't read review is when someone said something mean about CBB and it sent me on this spiral of like, what are your credentials? And I was like, let me look up every article and every opinion you've ever had ever to see if I disagree with you. And then I was like, you know what? Let me look up someone who didn't like Harry Potter. And I was like, let me look up someone who didn't. And I was like, you know what? You're going to stop. It was maybe like 2 hours in. And I was like, now you have to stop and you are never allowed to read a review again because you can't trust yourself because you're crazy. So sometimes it's like have thick skin. And sometimes it's like just know how crazy you are and avoid things that'll trigger you.
And just let it go because you can't like please everyone.
Yeah.
If you tried, your story would be lame.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's rough out here is the summary.
Yeah, you feel inspired.
But yeah, it helps and it hurts. Publishing helps and hurts.
Yeah. Okay, I want to know what was the hardest part about writing this book? And then what was the hardest part about trying to get it published?
Okay.
Because I think that's also, they're two very different worlds, even though they're linked together. Like to write something is one thing, to put it out in the world is something very different. So what was the biggest challenge that you feel you had to overcome or are still overcoming?
Okay, for writing it for the first part of the question. I think this is something that a lot of people talk about. It's just believing in yourself. It's the hardest part. When you're writing a first draft and you don't have an agent, you've never been published, you really have to believe that all this work is going to be worth it someday, maybe. But there is no guarantee at all. And you have to put in the work after you've worked all day. And for some people are single parents pulling this, or just actually not just single parents, just any parent trying to write on the side at the same time after work, after putting their kids to bed, all sorts of stuff. You have to keep going with no guarantee that any of it is going to work out. And I gave up for a couple days at a time. I'd always come back, but that was definitely the hardest part, just believing that I will write 130,000 words and somebody will care at some point. That was the hardest part, for sure. The second part was the hardest part about getting it published.
Yeah.
Like the
hardest part about being published.
Reviews. Hardest part about being published is definitely reviews. Because when you're writing it on your own, it's your baby, and it's whatever you want it to be, and you're so proud of it. And it's a piece of you. And it's kind of like when your book gets published. It's like this is your baby. Like you just birthed it. It's really little, and it's like. You don't want anyone to mess with it.
And someone comes, ugly!
Reviewers are like, bad plot! And then it's like they just like drop it.
I was like, oh, books are like Horcruxes, so when people are you're like, oh, you're killing the basilisk, but it really hurts.
Because you're the basilisk.
Yeah, you're the basilisk.
Like, it's your baby, and people are just like don't care, treating it roughly, saying your baby's ugly and it sucks. Yeah. So you're like, this is my baby. So that's definitely the worst part of it. It's just you want people to read your book. You're so excited, and you realize, oh, someone's gonna hate it. Someone out there was born to hate this book. Yeah. They're gonna be so mean because, like you said, someone hated Harry Potter. They were born for that. They were like, I'm gonna hate Harry Potter. They gave it to the world. No. Like, pretty much. So that's definitely make yourself laugh.
I just love the idea of a baby coming in with like a picture of a book and a dagger and being like, I'm ready
and the book
for my destiny.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is.
That's a great way to think about like negative reviews, though.
They were born
To
for
be like,
it.
this baby was born to hate me.
35 years ago.
35 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's rough, but it's always worth it because then you get all the really nice reviews. You get the DMs on Instagram from people who are so touched by the book, and you're like, it was worth
What's
it.
been your favorite reader reaction?
One girl.
Because this came out in May, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is fresh.
This is like a month and a half out. She's a toddler. No, she's not a toddler. She's not even moving. What? I don't have any kids. If that's not clear. She's still in the swaddle.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking this was bouncy chair.
I should never have a child. But one girl, I was on tour, and I was on tour with Victoria Aviard and Sahara Mafia, and it was so cool. Nice. And yeah, it was wild. I was starstruck. And one girl came up, and she was Latina, and she came up, and she just started crying. Yeah, and she gave me a letter, and she could barely say anything. Legitimately, her teardrops hit the envelope. I was just like I started crying. She was just really happy that there was like a Latino book that she could read, like in fantasy specifically. So that was one of my favorite ones, even though I was like embarrassed because I couldn't handle it properly.
You can never handle it.
But it was Victoria Aviard, when people cried, and it was often.
But she's had she's on book 4.
She was like, "There's no crying in my line. There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying here." Like, she was super chill. And I was just so confused and like happy and just like about to cry.
No, it's good.
But yeah, that was my favorite one so far.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like you're being cyberbullied because you're like, I put on mascara and you're making me cry. So you're attacking me, but it's always a beautiful. I think it's good. It's always good to feel it. But you'll have, again, after a trilogy is out, after several tears have been
then
brought
I'll be
to
like,
you.
no crying in this line.
Yeah, you'll be like, no one cries.
No.
Okay. And I want to know, what do you wish you could tell yourself 2 years ago?
So many things. It's hard not to buy those jeans. I would tell her that the struggle is worth it, that she could get there. And I think, I don't know if this is one of your questions, but about like the Spanish in the book.
Yeah.
So
okay, let's go. I love when things blend.
I was really scared. So the book, like there's desk magic, which I say is like Harry Potter magic. So the Wingardium Leviosa magic. So in my book, the language of magic is Spanish, mostly because I grew up in a mostly white neighborhood, county, where a lot of times you felt ashamed of being different, and you were kind of taught, subtly or not so subtly, that you shouldn't speak Spanish, you should be speaking English. And right now we're in a politically tense moment where that rhetoric is becoming very popular, of English first and all these sorts of things. And I really wanted to use my book to show kids that their culture is their power and their connection to their magic, which is why I made the language of magic Spanish. And I made it so that there are all these kingdoms in this world. Like there's a Chinese-based kingdom, so their language of magic is Mandarin. So everybody feels represented in that. Your connection to your ancestors from everybody who came before you, like that is your magic, and you should never give it up, because my cousins and I talk about it now.
And do you still speak Spanish?
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I asked that, because this last week I was talking to someone who is Mexican, and he grew up around his Mexican family, so I was like, oh, so they spoke like you speak Spanish, and he talked about how he and his older brother did speak Spanish, but then when he was about 5, basically his school teachers were like, he needs to speak English, and so then his mom started punishing him for speaking Spanish, and now he doesn't know Spanish anymore.
Yeah.
And it was like,
there's a lot of things like that. There's a ton. Like a lot of my cousins and I feel like we could speak better Spanish if we didn't feel ashamed about it. And we had to give up so much of ourselves to feel like we were going to be accepted. To just, like, at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. Like, I just want to be treated the same as everybody else, so I'm going to forget Spanish. I'm going to stop bringing certain types of food to lunch. I'm going to stop doing these sorts of things. I'm not going to tell people that I listen to this kind of music. I just listen to rock like everybody else, like this kind of thing. And I feel like if there were more books that tell you to hold on to your culture, then if I'd seen those books, I would have been way less likely to push those parts of myself away. Yeah. And it does feel like you're plucking petals off yourself, and you can't quite get them back,
Yeah, they're ranked. Have you seen Jane the Virgin?
Yes.
You know when Alba is like, you crush it, and now what is your flowers?
Yeah,
it's kind of like that.
Culture. I love that show so much. But yeah, it's like that, and I just really wanted to do a book that I hadn't seen it done. There's so many made up languages of magic, and I'm like, there's so many languages out there that aren't being used.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's funny because we take cues without even knowing. Like, it wasn't until this book that I realized I'd always use Latin for my made-up magic, and I was like, why? Because of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that must be it. And for the same reason, I spent like 10 years not writing Black characters in books, because I was like, oh, that must, so we don't. It seems simple to be like, oh, can a book really change that? But you're like, well, someone printed this. It must be right.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I should have said, for the difficult part was definitely trying to write a Latino world, because I went into it going, okay, I'm going to write a Latino world. And then I wrote like 20,000 words, and it was Game of Thrones City. And I was like, why is everybody named like Brianna? And I was like, why are people eating lamb stew? I've never had that in my house. And I realized, like, you have to like decolonize your brain.
I'm sorry, I wish I established that this was a snapping culture. I like that we had the but yes.
Because I went into it and I was still doing it wrong, and like the architecture was all gray, and I was like, in the DR there's a pink house next to an orange house next to a green house, like all sorts of stuff, and I took all of that because I was like, that's not right.
Yeah.
Magic doesn't work like that. It makes you feel like magic belongs to a certain group of people, a certain culture, which sucks, because it's why should that be the case? So that was probably the hardest part, was doing what I set out to do.
Yeah. It's funny because this is one of my theories. Don't fact check me. Don't at me. I'm not trying to learn about this right now. I'm trying to finish book 2. But I feel like, just if you think about our big fantasies, European fantasies, there's like a specific color scale. And then you think about, and it's very annoying to group all other fantasies as ethnic, like that in itself is like didactic. But like something, if I think of like the frames I've seen of Game of Thrones, and I think of like that one scene from Coco.
Yeah.
When he said, it's like there's so much color.
Yeah. That
I find.
And they would not put that in Game of Thrones. I think it was weird.
Yeah.
What is this?
I don't know. I got through that whole thing without watching, and I'm pretty proud. Side note.
Oh, you never watched Game of Thrones?
No, because I was just like,
you tired?
Yeah.
That's fair. See, it ended badly either.
Yeah, it was just one of those things, and so, but it was kind of fun.
Badly. Don't worry.
But that's a side note. Okay, cool. All right, I want to go to lightning round.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
And then open it up to questions. So, what is your Hogwarts house?
Slytherin.
Evil
in the store. Usually people are like, oh no, Slytherin all day. I took the Harry Potter test, the one on Pottermore, 5 times. I got Slytherin.
Did you take the BuzzFeed Pottermore one?
Okay.
This is very important. This is important for all of us. So the BuzzFeed Pottermore test is the same exact questions as the Pottermore test, but it gives you your like spectrum. So, like, the Pottermore test will say you're 31% Slytherin, so you're Slytherin. The BuzzFeed one will say you're 31% Slytherin, like 30% Ravenclaw, so you're a Slitherclaw. And then it's even more specific.
I've always thought it was a Slitherpuff, like a weird...
Yeah, no, it's real. And they're more... It's actually fun, so you should look it up. Okay. All right, Hogwarts crush.
Dean Thomas.
Me too!
He's so cute now. I watched How to Get Away with Murder for him alone.
Oh my god!
He's 6'4".
He's so tall!
There's nothing that can be
literally as tall as this lamp.
He's just up there.
It's so funny. My childhood best friend printed. I don't even know how she had access to a printer. The reason I'm using my phone is because as an adult, I still don't have access to printers. But she printed out a picture of his face, like pixelated, and put it in a frame. And I had that for the whole Harry Potter series. So great answer. There wasn't a wrong answer, but you definitely did the right answer. All right, Edward or Jacob?
We just talked about height. Jacob was 6'4".
He was tall.
He was okay. Taylor Lautner messed this up for everyone. It was such BS. They cast him, and he did not look like Jacob.
Yeah.
And he was way shorter.
I mean, no, you don't have to argue with me. I was like, one is hot and one is literally cold. Trying to kill you. I was like, you're cold and sparkly. But again, no judgment zone.
But Taylor Lautner's wig was terrible when Jacob had like a luscious, like, I'm still mad. He was pretty much Coco, but like happy.
Okay.
From Pocahontas.
I get that.
Coco was hot. He just wasn't fun. Think how fun Coco was.
Okay. All right. Nice. That's why I say. I was like, if those first 40,000 words were dirty, I don't care. The last book that you loved reading.
I did just read An Enchantment of Ravens.
Okay,
and that was fun.
Awesome.
It's old though. Not old. I wish I could say like a new title.
Old. Oh, well, it's not that old.
It's not that old.
It's fine.
But that was the last thing.
The last song you streamed.
I Want It That Way.
Nice. That's a good one.
I saw this on the news and I was like, it's time.
No, I get that.
It's time to go back to that.
That's really great. All right, fill in the blank.
Okay.
Taylor Swift is a.
Oh.
Fill it in. You can't even think. No. You can't think. You just have to say it.
Complicated lady.
Okay. I found that one on the internet. I was like, wow, amazing things can happen from that.
There's so many. See,
yeah. No. Okay.
Complicated lady.
Do you respect Kanye West?
No.
Do you like the smell of gasoline?
Yeah, it's good. People either like it's like smelling markers. It's like, you shouldn't like it, but it smells good. I don't. Sorry.
No apologies. Favorite Avenger?
America's ass.
It's funny when you said that when you said he is America's ass, I hadn't seen the movie yet, and I thought you came up with that. No. And I was like, what an amazing human being. Still think you're pretty amazing. But okay, least favorite part about being a published author, but we kind of talked about recent reviews, and the favorite part.
Nice review.
Okay, good. All right, now it's to you.